So first term means mixing two immiscible liquids by adding a third stabilizing agent, and that will be emulsification. Now, emulsification plays a critical role in the fat digestion in the digestive tract, and steroids, lipids that we learned about a little bit a while ago, can act as emulsifying agents, being components of so-called bile salts. So bile salts are neither, well, they have a polar head and the non-polar tail, which makes them what's called amphiphilic. They're both polar and non-polar in some way. So in order for oil to dissolve in water, we need to add a third emulsifying agent. And from that, we're moving on to the lab. So lipids that we consume, they're non-polar substances because of the hydrocarbon segments. When you consume fats, they end up in the gut. You're basically mixing two immiscible liquids. You mix oil or fat with the water. So in order to mix oil and fat, you need to add emulsifying agent. When you wash your hands or you wash dishes and you remove oil from your hands or your dishes, you add soap, right? This is an emulsifying agent. So soap contains a polar head and a non-polar tail, and it allows you to mix a non-polar oil in the center with a polar water, because the non-polar tail of soap interacts with the oil particles, while the polar head of soap interacts with water. In your gut, the role of soap is played by bile salts. Bile salts are chemicals that contain steroids. They act as emulsifying agents for lipids that we eat. Bile salts break up lipids into small particles in the small intestine, forming so-called micelles. And the smaller the particle, the higher the area of those particles total, and that allows for a better digestion using enzymes. As a matter of fact, people that have their gallbladder removed, the bile release is delayed. So this is why those folks have to be very careful when eating high-fat diet. Alright, so this is what happens here. We've got 3 tubes with 5 milliliters of water in each. And first, I'm going to add 2 drops of corn oil to each tube. Takes a little while. 2, and 1 more. So, oh, I mixed it up. Never mind. Okay, so a little correction here. First tube does indeed contain water. Second tube now contains 5 milliliters of soap, and last tube contains 5 milliliters of bile salt solution. So I've already added corn oil into the first tube, so now I'm adding 2 drops of corn oil in the second tube, and 2 drops of corn oil in the third tube. So now the question, of course, is which one's going to work. So I'm going to close the one, and I'm going to shake it vigorously. Okay. And I'm going to look at the outcomes. So it doesn't really get stabilized. So I'm going to do the same with the solution number 2. And I'm going to do the same with the solution number 3. So we can wait for a little bit to see the results. So what you start seeing is this. If you look at the mix of water and corn oil, it gets separated. The water gets cleared out because all the corn oil starts to float up. Here the emulsion is pretty much, you cannot see the small tiny little droplets. So soap stabilizes these two liquids together, forming a very fine emulsion. And same happens in case of bile salts. They stabilize the emulsion very nicely here. So, going to the questions here. Does the oil dissolve in water? Well, we saw it multiple times. No, it doesn't. They get separated fairly quickly, like here. Okay. But soap makes it better. Okay. So oil is mixed with water pretty nicely in case of soap, and this is because soap is amphiphilic and its nonpolar tail binds to, well, fat, and polar head sticks out into the water. Same happens with the bile salts. So oil and bile salts basically work the same as oil in the soap. In this lab review, we're going to be answering questions only about lab number 26. Vegetable oil would belong to triglycerides, like all oils and fats are. Lipids in the intestine are emulsified by bile. Bile is a steroid molecule. And emulsification is an addition of stabilizer reagent, stabilizer chemical, that allows you to mix two non-mixing liquids such as oil and water.